Well, I've more than consumed my allotted time. I hope we enjoyed ourselves. If not, as I say, beat on me, I'll try to answer questions when you're ready. Don, I turn back to you for now.
Thank you, Lynn. So, questions now for Lynn, and then, and also, if you have questions you'd like us to answer in future meetings, we want to do that as well. And I know, Dennis, thank you for bringing up the baseline question, and we'll make sure that we cover that in detail in subsequent meetings. So that's an important point to, as part of our thinking about this fall.
Yeah, please understand, I read what the future holds with these 3 fora, and I tried not to tread too heavily on the next one. So. Yes, sir, ma'am.
So the example you gave at the beginning of like 3 inches of pavement and, I don't know, 12 inches of...
Right, that was an arbitrary example.
Okay, so are there, I'm sure there are standard thicknesses of each of those layers for the different classifications, functional classifications of road that you gave?
Oh, how much money are you willing to put on that? Sure.
Well, it seems reasonable.
Might seem reasonable. I bet you that's one of the most common questions I get.
Could we hear the question, please? Because the
I
acoustics
had
don't work.
trouble with it as well. She was saying, can you want to repeat your question a little bit
Well,
louder?
my
Stand
question-
up so they can hear you.
So my question is, if there are standards for the depth of pavement and the depth of the sublayer, subgrade or grade, I'm sorry, I can't remember the word for it, but the layer underneath the pavement, in the different functional divisions of these roads, and if you suddenly divert traffic and therefore create a different usage for that road, can you whip on 4 more inches of asphalt and hope
Sure
that
you
helps?
could.
Or,
Yeah, you could, provided 4 inches is the right answer. Presumably you would seek, did you get the question that time? Okay.
Thank you.
I don't mean to be silly with you, but if you just stop and think about it for a second as to the standard designs, kind of like out of a catalog or something like that. If you go from here north, you get one change in weather. You go from here south. There are times when it's snowing south of us and not here. There are times when it's snowing north of us and not here. So, first of all, weather is different. And if you take an area as big as the state of New York, nothing is happening over the whole state all at one time, usually. The soils are different. Some soils are part of the deposits of Lake Ontario. Some of them are glacial deposited. They have much different shear strength characteristics and so on. So each road literally has to be tailored to the environment, the traffic, and the subgrade conditions that it's in. And we try not to make it so complicated that it can't be built. For instance, you can imagine, given history of how we do things, we say from the Ithaca city line to Tioga County line, we're going to repave Highway 79. We want you to put down 3.5 inches of hot mix asphalt concrete on top of what's already there. 3.5 inches is going to be too much for some places and maybe not quite enough for other places, but on the average, maybe it's right 85% of the time. Or 95% of the time, and the places where it's wrong we'll fix if we have to. Go dig a hole and put some better stuff in and cover it over. So we tailor our roads to the conditions that they have to be in. That's what gives me students and happiness. Continue.
So a follow-up question, so how reasonable is it to retailer the road for a change in use? I realize that,
Again,
what's the use, what's the
this
issue?
is something that I put into my talk, and realizing that we had limited time tonight, I took it back out again. But what you're asking about is something that in the engineering field we refer to as structural evaluation of the road. We can design a road by saying we're going to have so much traffic, certain types of materials and so on and so forth as inputs, and we calculate what thicknesses do we need. When we're doing an evaluation, the thicknesses are already given, the road's already built. And now what we're trying to do is to figure out how long is that going to last, how much does certain traffic use for each type of traffic, and how much additional thickness do we have to add to achieve a certain life, to make that, how long it's going to last answer be the answer we want to hear. And so the principles can be worked in either direction, either to design a new road or assess the remaining life and structural needs of a used road, provided that we use good engineering principles. I've heard a lot of different approaches advocated in New York State, and some of them, I think, are, to a certain extent, a response to the capabilities of the agency proposing. If you own a core drill, and you don't own a testing machine, you would be inclined to say, well, I'll go out and take a whole bunch of cores and establish what the prevailing conditions are. After the traffic has used the road, I'll take some more cores and we'll figure out how much they owe us. That wouldn't be particularly sound engineering, because almost nothing changes as far as the gradation that you could get out of the cores. The traffic causes a fatigue failure, but they don't cause the particles to break, so the gradation doesn't change. So if you only own the core deal, you probably ought not to be in the business of doing evaluation of roads. Somebody else might say, I have a camera, so I can go out and I can take pictures of the road, the initial conditions of the road. Well, you saw that in the early portion of the life of the road, the condition, the visual condition of the road almost doesn't change for about half the life of the road, the first half of the life of the road. And then whoosh, down it goes. But if somebody used up 10% of the life of the road, it really doesn't matter whether they use the first 10%, the middle 10%, or the last 10%. They used 10% of the life of the road that was unanticipated when that road was put down. So if you only own a camera, you probably ought not to be in the business of road evaluation, because it makes a heck of a difference where you are on this performance curve, whether the camera would pick up anything, and then how do you change it into numbers? How do you determine those numbers in court? Yes, ma'am?
So you've made the argument that the way a road is constructed is based on historical use and
Most commonly.
okay. And if you're now anticipating a known level of use, and you also said that it's the road user cost which is really going up, and
That's right.
you would like to be repairing these roads earlier than the taxpayers would like them to pay.
Personal pet peeve of mine, yes, ma'am.
Okay. If the major change is going to be, say, by a lot of large trucks that are known to be coming, then would it be possible for a town to say, well, we want to be changing our roads in anticipation of that, well, at the time you would consider optimal. In other words, not do it the way the taxpayers have done it traditionally, but do it when we know from your argument that it's going to be the most economical way to do it, because we have a person to pay for it now.
You're saying take their money but hold it in escrow until we get to this optimum time. Well, it's tough enough figuring out what's a reasonable charge, let alone when we've hit the optimum time. So you're making it doubly difficult. Then what if we had two developments on the same road at the same time? How do we partition the damage between those two? So,
but then you're arguing against your whole idea that we are currently not
right.
Doing this
I
at the
should have
right
kept my
time.
mouth shut about that. Because, as I say, it's a personal observation of mine. I have a suspicion, I can't speak for Cindy, but I bet it would make her as proud as could be if all of our roads were just smooth and black and nice. And she knew in her mind that they were costing the road users the minimum necessary to drive on the roads. But realistically, we don't do it that way, and I accept the fact that we do it the way we do it. Doesn't prevent me from grumbling about the fact that there's a better way.
Right, but if we have a coming known cause of the expense, it seems like we ought to be able to predict that.
In the long run, it would save you money, but at the front end, you'd have to pay some money to get all those roads in good condition.
Or they,
We had to do it over a period of years. That's why I have a summer intern program where students go out to municipalities all over the state and do a 5-year capital improvement program and hand a report over to the municipality. that tells them the order, what to do and which roads are the highest priority to fix.
So before you go on to the next question, Nellie, we'll be wading into that subject at the third forum, talking about the administrative process. If somebody came forward with a development proposal, then what do we do with that information and how do we evaluate what needs to be done and what the bonding should be and so on. So we'll pick that up, the third one.
Okay,
We'll be back on again.
all right.
Maybe
In
that
this-
works in here right here.
In this road user permitting process, we have a golden opportunity to get information from the developer that's going to be using the roads, the burst of traffic that was not originally designed for, to tell us how many easels they're gonna put on the road, what route they would like to have, and a variety of fundamental information that could be used to determine, not a yes or no question, but a yes or no answer, but if that's what you want to do, then here's how much it's going to cost. So, again, I'm stealing from future forums, but there is light down at the end of the tunnel. Yes, sir, you, and then I'll come to you.
Do we know the load carrying capability of most of our roads?
Well, that'll be a subject for next,
Yeah,
for
well,
number
okay.
two.
All right.
Yep.
Are you working on it with Lavella?
Yes.
Yeah. With Dan Walker? Yeah. Yes, sir?
I think I'm still confused between whether or not one can do a sound calculation of what the damage will be from a developmental project based on a particular set of circumstances that you just outlined, loads, trucks, trips. I keep feeling I'm getting contradicted. Yes, it can be done, no, it can't be done.
No, I would not
Don't
leave
think
with
that it's
the
going to
impression
be
it cannot be
simple,
done.
it's complicated. I'm still at sea as to whether one could legitimately craft a approach that would legitimately compensate the taxpayers on one hand and be fair to the haulers on the other.
What I was trying to illustrate just a few minutes ago was that it needs to be done in a proper way. A term that I didn't put on the glossary, thought about doing so but didn't, is an evolving term that has come into use over the last 15 years in road engineering called mechanistic design. What that means is a calculation of stresses and strains in the pavement layers under various traffic loads with some knowledge of the material's properties. And this is not something that I would advocate that any layperson try to do. The mathematics of it is complicated, but there are people that are trained how to do it, and computer programs that do the heavy calculations and such. So what you're looking for is a skilled individual who's knowledgeable in mechanistic design to go through your road system and establish the remaining life of the existing road system from today forward in terms of something that we've defined, easels. Because that's a common denominator type of a measure of remaining life. And if you choose somebody to help you, to advise you, that doesn't know anything about mechanistic design, then you are faced with, well, what have you lost? What are you giving up? What compromises are being made? I tried to be extreme by saying, well, if you dealt with somebody that only has a camera, or they only have a core drill, you're probably dealing with the wrong party. But if you've got somebody that you have reason to believe really knows his stuff, then the techniques that I'm talking about that can be used, which I didn't get into tonight, have been around for probably 25 years, and are well understood by engineers, but only some engineers. You wouldn't hire an electrical engineer to do this, and you probably wouldn't want a civil engineer to do a powerhouse for you either, so we each have our specialties.
So Joe, we're going to spend a bit of time on this, your question, next meeting, which will be, and Dan Walker from Labella will be talking about load carrying capabilities of local roads, so we'll be pointing into that. And then at the third one, we'll be talking about administrative procedures to work through this. And so that's coming up, but I'm glad you're bringing it forward. That means that you've picked up, the basics of what's going on here, so thank you.
Yeah, so
Other questions?
Did everybody that came in get a copy of that nomenclature handout? Is there anyone that did not? You did not. Are there any extra copies laying around? You can give away mine. I'll make a file of them now.
Thanks again.
Got enough copies? Oh, anybody else need one? Yes, ma'am?
No, I had another question.
Oh, you don't want one of these?
No, I have.
Oh, sure.
I don't need to. So, I'm sorry to belabor this point, but it just will interest me. If you have a road that has a certain amount of pavement and a certain amount of that substuff, and you decide that the use of that road is now changing, are there conditions where you can just change the pavement, or are you more likely to have to dig up the pavement surface, increase the subload level, and then the pavement?
You ever heard the term overlay
Um,
in reference to a road?
no.
An overlay is a structural layer that's added to the surface of the road. So you get to doing it very easily. And it's possible to calculate the required thickness. An interesting aspect of the required thickness of an overlay is that the longevity of the road is proportional to the square of the thickness. So while it costs twice as much to put down twice as much, it lasts 4 times longer. So you say, well, sock it to it. Let's just start buying asphalt. Just before you do that, let me change my stock to the oil companies, and you can do that.
But you could compensate for that 5% threshold, 5% or greater.
There's 2 ways, and it depends on whether you think you can trust the town board or whether you can't. No offense intended.
Sure.
One way is to charge a road user cost to the developer for this road use permit, and do as the lady suggested, put it in escrow, and as long as it got used to repair the roads at some time in the not too distant future, remember, as soon as that road starts to deteriorate, the road user cost goes up. So as a fiduciary responsibility, the town board should come across and fix that road if they charge a fee for the damage that would be done. That's one approach that can be taken. That's the I trust my board approach, okay? The other approach is you figure out what you want the developer to do and have him do it in advance so that he adds enough structure to the road system so that when he's done with his traffic and he doesn't come with his hands and say, can I please have another month? No. Dude, you paid for 4 months, you get 4 months. A little more enforcement is necessary there to be sure that the roads aren't overloaded and so on by the developer. But still in all, you get it at the front end rather than the back end. Now, either way, the taxpayer should be equally compensated, so you're sort of indifferent, but in Pennsylvania, they have a very loose approach to how they do things down there. They're learning, and I think there's some things that they told me they wish they'd done differently from the get-go. But they tend to take that do it in advance and it'll all come out fine approach, while other places here in New York State and elsewhere have said, we want to fix the roads, put them back into good condition. What would be unfair is to have a road that, let's say, 50% of its useful life has already been consumed by normal traffic. Developer gets on the road and uses 30% of the life of the road. There's still 20% left. but we tell the developer he's got to totally replace the road. Give me back 100%. We've overcharged him by a lot. Because the taxpayers only lost 30%, they got back 100. That's a hell of a deal. There may be some developers who just have so much money rolling around in their pocket that they would prefer to do it that way. And then they can let the road get in really bad condition, and when they're done, give you a beautiful, nice road, but don't forget that road user cost curve that goes up during the time that the road is in deteriorated condition.
So you wouldn't want that road user period to be very long?
Well, it generally is the case when we're talking about developments of any, whether it's windmills, coal mines, shopping centers, gas wells, whatever it might be. Most of the heavy-duty loading is over a fairly short duration of time. If you'll permit me one colorful story, it's not very colorful. I used to work for the Willamette National Forest once upon a time. And one year they had a particularly long winter. And it was such that the district rangers were given, and these are silviculturists, tree guys, had the authority to authorize logging and hauling to the timber mills, which always were down in the valleys, and the logs were always up at the top of the hill. And it was rare at that time for the Forest Service to pave a road. But there was a nice campground, and they decided, hey, it's summertime, we'll build this really nice road. And just about the time they were done building it, the snows came in, so they closed the road. And the following spring, the mill down at the bottom of the hill had tears, they had tears in their eyes about how they were running out of logs, and couldn't they please start cutting logs. So the district ranger, without checking with anybody in engineering, authorized this. One day later, my phone rings. Would I please come and look at the road? One pass of a log truck went down that nice asphalt paved road, and there was 4 stripes about 6 inches deep and just the width of a tire for each of the 4 tires on the axle, where that heavy load had just sheared right through the asphalt and totally destroyed the road. One pass of the road. So, it's not entirely impossible to fill a road in a single pass. I've discovered that through my own experiences. But you want to be sure that when you put in regulations, that you have people that know what they're doing making the decisions, I think. And that was a situation where somebody who didn't know what he was doing allowed something that he shouldn't have allowed, because the rules and regulations of the Forest Service did not allow that. So he lost his job, the log hauler had to repave the road, and everybody was angry over an erroneous decision. Yes, sir, I think we're getting close to the last
Yeah, I
question.
guess I'm just kind of curious. You talked about the expected lifespan of a road being 15, 20 years, and I guess I was just curious kind of what thoughts and thinking goes into that. That's an appropriate time frame.
I used it for example in this talk. Realistically, I've got a road out in front of my house that was repaved 40 years ago. It's getting a little rough now, but you can get more than 20 years out of a paving job. As the example I just gave, you can get 1 day out of a paving job too. So it's best to actually run the numbers and do the calculations and so on. But as I say, I realize that there's 50, 60,000 miles of road in this state where design by experience is used, not design by calculation. Did we ever satisfy your question now? I thought by the time I got done I would get around to dealing with it.
I don't know if it, at this point, as much of a question it is a concern. Maybe, undue blame or over-regulating as Tompkins County did with their law. they started out with trying to keep us down to 25 loads a day, or 10 loads a day on
Yeah.
certain jobs. It's come way up since then, but,
So form 10 companies and you can run 100 loads.
pardon?
You create
Yeah.
10 companies, you can have 100 loads.
Well, per job.
No, I'm being facetious again. Yeah, it isn't that simple. It isn't that straightforward, but I think from what Don is saying, some of your concerns are going to be addressed at the next session. rather
I
than
mean, my
this one.
concern is regulating the roads to a point where developers will just go to different towns or different areas.
That can happen.
And
Maybe it will happen.
from my perspective,
One point that I hope that you heard tonight, I tried to make it as clearly as I could, is that there's a difference between an easel and a truck. And from my point of view, the most important parameter in determining whether this is just general use or is it special use should be in terms of easels applied to the road, not number of trucks.
exactly.
And I think as long as the governing agencies don't lose sight of that, you're already a leg up on okay.
Well, initially, Tompkins County had that completely out of sight with the 10 loads a day, 30 loads per week
Yeah.
for a job.
So
But at the
Dennis,
same time, you don't want to go too far the other direction and allow 10,000 trucks before you even pick up a pencil and start calculating.
That's true, but the current economic conditions is our company, I mean, most everybody, could not stand any less economic activity.
Well, as a citizen of the town, I'm not speaking as your speaker tonight, but just as a neighbor down the street here, it's been my observation that this town has been trying its darndest to figure out reasonable and equitable ways to deal with this issue. And to do it in such a way that it doesn't focus on any one special user, but recognizes that the roads were paid for by the taxpayers and the taxpayers should get full value of what they paid for. Would you say that's a reasonable characteristic?
that's what we're trying to do.
of what
I
you're
I
trying
wanted
to do?
to, Dennis, I sat in, as you know, with the county meetings. There's completely a political process right from the get-go. So the background about how roads respond to loads was never part of the discussion. We never learned about or had any discussion about the seasonality. All that was all left under the table. We talked about impacts on businesses. That's the whole discussion. We recognize there are impacts on businesses, that this local law could have impacts. We want to learn about those impacts. We also want to start that discussion by saying that roads don't obey laws, they don't obey people, they have their own dynamics, and we as taxpayers, we assist those roads in their life by spending money. So how do we do this in a way that's responsible? And I think Lynn gave the right introduction. That's why we spent the time we've spent. That's why we're doing this completely different than any other town has done. We're having these forums, we're having these discussions, because I'd like to have you come to us in the third one and say, Don, I recognize all these impacts, but you should still know that this is going to be an impact on me or on business or that type of thing, because we'd love to have that factored in as we bring something forward to the town board. So,
I
thank you.
guess one of the things missing from the discussion tonight is, trucking is something that adds to the quality of our life. We've focused on the tire hitting the road, but it is goods and services brought to us that obviously we like.
It affects your standard of living, certainly. I'm not old enough, but my father told me there was times in his life when he grew up when you had no hope of getting a head of lettuce in the middle of February. You got an orange at Christmas time in your stocking, and the next one you're going to see would be the following spring sometime. So yeah, trucking. I made this comment to the Dean of Agriculture just a week ago. If you think about it for a second, everything that goes from the farm these days, unless somebody is so fortunate as to have a landing strip or a railroad that crosses their farm, it leaves the farm on a truck, and all of the inputs to the farm come in on a truck. And if the roads can't hold those loads, agriculture is in deep trouble.
So what is,
Fortunately, I was talking to a woman that grew up on a farm, so she understood what the hell I was talking about. But I had two deans ahead of her, neither of whom had grown up on a farm, and it would have gone in one ear and out the other if I had said it to them.
And
Anyway.
Linda, I don't think it's going to catch, this law is not supposed to catch the normal trucking traffic. I mean, we had a situation a few months ago where Cornell had a construction site going, and someone wanted the dirt from there, and we're talking 25, 30 loads every day, all day long, on a road they shouldn't have. They could have gone to the other end and come in, and they went the full length of it.
Right.
I think that's what we're trying to catch. Danby, they've got it now, so they catch every trucker, the law they passed, and we're trying not to do that.
Right. No, I totally understand that it's, you know, we know where we've been at, we know where we're at, we have a pretty good idea of the base on most of our roads, and timing and improvements that were done on them. I mean, that piece of the picture is well defined. I guess what I'm talking about is making it is a concern of mine that the truck traffic is seen as, if it only gets talked about as a negative, because that's not the case. These trucks are doing things and transporting goods and bringing services that, you know, we all use.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing that point up.
so all this will come, when we have the baseline traffic discussion, that'll all be, help put all this into
I'm
perspective.
sure
'cause
well
that's-
done.
Because
Thank
that's
you.
what,
Yep.
the baseline is what we've experienced up to now, and that's the city.
Not just the baseline, though. I'm saying, as our society moves forward,
Well,
and we
I know
have
what you're saying, but we'll talk about
opportunities.
baseline and where we go with
all
that.
right.
So are we trying to get questions to deal with next, in future meetings, before we head out? Other questions?
Things that you want to hear about at the next session, for instance? Want to give her a quick synopsis?
Sure,
of what the next
glad
one's
to.
about?
So we've been talking about state, county, and town roads. And we actually have town roads that have different levels of load carrying capability. So we'll be talking, that's how we'll focus the first part of our meeting next time, talking about load carrying capabilities of town roads and and how the town and county and state roads all fit together. We have Fernando de Aragon from Hopkins County Planning, who actually did a freight study about a decade ago. Even though it's old news, it helps set a good baseline for how traffic, especially freight traffic, moves through the town. It's not talking about a project on a specific road, but just how it moves through the town. So that'll be important. And then Dan Walker from Lobella, who's done some engineering work on the load carrying capability of our roads. We'll be answering some of the specific questions about how many trucks can we take and what's the seasonal impacts and so on. So we'll be looking at that information. There's a number of assumptions that go with that. So we'll try to get some of that on the table just so we can all appreciate where we're coming from. And then Cindy and I are going to talk about what it costs the town of Caroline to repair a road, whether we do a full repair because the road's going to completely destroy it, or whether we do a regular update, what type of a cycle we're on, and what the cost has been to the taxpayers over time. That's kind of where we're starting from. That's what the taxpayers have been used to, because there is a financial part of this as well. It's financial to businesses, it's financial to taxpayers. So we want to try to frame that part of it. And then the third meeting, we'll have Guy Crow, who's here, our attorney, help set the basis for what type of laws are out there within New York State, what type of options do we have. And then the committee will talk about what we've learned. So this is what we've learned, talking about the administrative procedure that we've been brought up, talking about the baseline traffic, all that type of information, and then bring it all together with the type of things we're thinking about. We'd love to have you sit in on that conversation and then give us feedback. Just like I said earlier, this is not a done deal. We're still learning, and this is our opportunity to reach out to the community and get feedback so that we can bring something forward to the town board that's very responsive and responsible. So that's our goal. So I want to thank you all for coming. I don't know, John, do you know how long it will take us to get this on our website? 4 days. So I would say in a week. If you have anybody that didn't make it, you want to pass it around, or the Town of Caroline website will have this show on. And then essentially 4 weeks from now, the 21st, February, we'll get together again, and hopefully most of you can attend and spread the word around if there's someone that should be here. Start getting into more of the specifics, getting with town of Caroline. So thank you. Dennis?
One more thing. I just would like to compliment you, Don, on, you reminded me, your input at the county, road preservation committee meetings that we were on. And I just want you people to realize that Don did have, his input wasn't political. It was practical about the easels and the weight per axle and so forth. And like he said, it really, at the beginning, wasn't listened to at the county, but
Thank you, Dennis. All right,
here it is.
go home and get warm, stay warm. See you in a month.